Thank you, Prof. And good morning, colleagues. I am delighted today to present at this conference with my colleague from the Center for Climate Change, Energy and Environmental Law at the University of Eastern Finland, Rosemary, Mwanza. Our presentation is adapted from our joint manuscript on environmental law and plastic pollution in the age of COVID-19. We hold the view that we can save lives and the environment during COVID-19. And we also note that COVID-19 has brought some gains in environmental protection. The hard and soft lockdowns imposed by governments, depending on one's country, have restricted international travel and massively closed industries, resulting in less manufacturing waste and therefore less pollution and improved air and water qualities across the globe. In South Africa, birds have been seen reclaiming their natural habitat in Cape Town by occupying beaches and other areas at which they have not been seen in the last few decades. The poaching of our rhinos at Kruger National Park and other conservation sites has also decreased tremendously. In India, the Himalayan peak has been visible in some certain areas due to clearing skies as a result of the reduction of manufacturing, which pollutes the skies. Some Indian rivers have also been clearer due to reduced industrial waste pollution. In China, the biggest manufacturer, NASA has noted a rapid decline of about 48% of nitrogen dioxide in the troposphere, so vast that it could be seen from space. And then in Africa, in Uganda, the birth rate among primates has also increased, showing that, and could be linked to the pandemic in some way because there's been reduced human activity in those areas. However, not all has been rosy and merry, as we will show today. We intend to show and analyze the issues and the legal and policy framework to find solution for the control of plastic pollution beyond the coronavirus pandemic. And to do this, we first have to understand what has been the status quo and how has COVID-19 impacted on that. I will discuss two issues, as we have already noted that this is a joint presentation. The first issue that I will discuss is an overview of the status quo and how has been plastic pollution before COVID-19. What has been the problem? And then I'll also look at COVID-19 and what has been called the plastic pandemic. And then my colleague Rosemary will analyze three issues. Firstly, she will examine the legal and policy framework for the regulation of plastic waste pollution. Secondly, she would look at the challenges to the legal framework on controlling plastic waste pollution during COVID-19. And then lastly, she would make some recommendations for policy reform. I would now start with the status quo ante, the plastic pandemic, the plastic problem before COVID-19, sorry. So prior to the emergence of the coronavirus, the world had noted an exponential increase in the use of plastics. I would use the statistics which are available in 2015 because they've also been endorsed in several platforms by the Department of Environmental Affairs, and also because they seem to be the latest compilation. We haven't been able to locate the recent statistics. So in 2015, the Department of Environmental Affairs noted that the global usage of plastic was increasing at 4% per annum, resulting in 322 million tons of plastic production for that year alone. And in the same year, South Africa accounted for 1.5 million tons of plastics. The increase in plastic usage resulted in a directly proportional increase in the generation of the amounts of plastic waste. However, of all that plastic waste produced, only about 21% was recycled in South Africa. This points to a huge plastic problem. Available figures which were released by Plastic South Africa and endorsed by the Department of Environmental Affairs showed that in 2015, different industries used varying amounts of plastics in their processes, with the manufacturing sector accounting for 53% of all plastic produced and used in South Africa. The building and construction sector accounted for 13%, while agriculture stood at 9%. Electrical and electronics industries accounted for 6%, the automotives 4%, and other industries grouped together accounted for about 15%. What has been noted is that most of the plastic used had a short lifespan, because it was used in the manufacturing and retail sector for food in supermarkets, soft drinks, and textiles. Plastic carrier bags, plastic packaging, and single-use plastic items dominated the bulk of plastic usage in the retail sector. Now, since only 21% of the total plastic output was recycled, it meant that about 79% of plastics which were not recycled found themselves in landfills, rivers, the ocean, and other areas where it did not belong, resulted in environmental pollution. There have also been concerns that there is a mismanagement. We have more than 2/3 of the plastic pollution output which is not recycled, then surely we have a problem in our hands, and which is not only expensive to clean up, but which also imposes various risks to humans, wildlife, and marine life. In spite of these challenges, there has been efforts to control plastic waste pollution. While the government gazetted in 2017 the regulations on industrial waste management plans, South Africans have also been playing their role. There's been a steady increase in the number of informal waste pickers who have been able to collect this waste, sort it out, and then send it out for recycling. Of course, there is a financial incentive to it, but at the end of the day, we see that they are playing a huge role in eliminating plastic waste, which had not been taken up during formal cleaning operations in cities. I'll then proceed and look at the plastic pandemic during COVID-19. What has happened is that in cities and towns across the globe, the COVID-19 pandemic has threatened to roll back on some of the strides made over the years towards the control, elimination, and restriction of single-use plastic items. As the world rallied towards doing all that is necessary to save lives, in America, for example, restaurants have been seen refusing personal reusables such as coffee mugs and reverting to plastic cups and lids, wrapped straws, and condiment packets. In South Africa, the situation was somewhat different. The hard lockdown, which was imposed by the government in March under Alert Level 5, suspended economic activity in restaurants and cafes, as the government used its regulatory powers in terms of the Disaster Management Act to ensure that people stay at home to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Public eateries only opened under Alert Level 3 and under strict conditions. What we saw is that the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs promulgated what has been called the COVID-19 regulations, which inter alia requires South Africans to wear personal protective equipment in the form of masks while in public. The single-use nature of these PPEs by both ordinary persons and medical personnel resulted in huge amounts of waste, such as masks, gloves, and plastic aprons. The streets have now been littered with the discarded masks. Now, this problem has been aggravated by the fact that the hard lockdown regulations suspended informal waste picking because the government thought people should stay at home in order to save lives. And that resulted in an increase, a tremendous increase in the amount of plastic waste that went uncollected. But of course, in some areas, we saw that the government tried by all means to clean up. For example, the MTN tax rank has been known to be not so clean a place. But when lockdown started, we saw the government actually moving in to clean those areas. However, the shortage of PPE has forced health workers in South Africa, in the United Kingdom, and some parts of the USA to improvise by wearing plastic bags and other large plastics as PPE, resulting in more plastic waste. So generally, I think I've laid down the context of our presentation. I'll then hand over to my colleague, Rosemary, to proceed with the presentation.
Okay, let me put the screen up. Oops. I hope everybody can see it. Okay, so in order to understand how the COVID-19 pandemic challenges the existing legal and policy framework on plastic waste management or the management of waste generally, we thought it's important to first to try to start with an appreciation of what the goals of the South African legal and policy framework on waste management are. So these are the key legal and policy framework that we reviewed. So I will not go through each one of them independently. I will only report on the findings of our review, which was that the legal and policy framework commits to very specific goals. And these goals can generally be summarized as the goals of ensuring protection of health and well-being of humans in line with the section or Article 24 of the Constitution, the protection of environment, ecosystems, and biological diversity, the prevention of waste as a primary goal, whether that, and that applies to all types of waste. Then there is the goal of reduction, reuse, recycling, recovery, treatment, and disposal in cases where waste cannot the production of waste cannot be prevented or avoided. Then the legal and policy framework also commits to equitable waste management, and some of the points of equitable waste management have been touched on by Professor Anel's presentation. Then the final goal is efficiency, which is efficiency in terms of cost, and this requires proper financial planning, and importantly, utilizing the competencies of multiple stakeholders or actors, including those at the national, provincial, municipal governments, private sector, and civil society. So with this understanding of the goals, it becomes clearer to then identify the challenges that the plastic pandemic in the COVID-19 era has posed to the law. So I will just review a few of them, and we are still developing some of this in our manuscript. The first obvious one is that plastic pollution has increased the risk to human environmental well-being, and this risk comes from the increase of plastic pollution or plastic waste, and also the increase of the levels of microplastics that may find their way into drinking water, into soil, into marine environments and oceans. Then the increase of plastic waste has also undermined the goal of prevention and avoidance of waste. As I have said, the South African legal and policy framework commits first and foremost to prevention and avoidance of waste. And only if that cannot be attained, do the other measures of controlling waste come into play. Then the other challenge has been the exclusion of informal waste pickers. At the outset of the restrictions that were imposed by the governments, it was reported that informal waste pickers were first told that they had to stop their work. It's only later on, after the gazettement of the regulations, were they also included in the group of services that were allowed to continue during the restrictions. But we also noted that this is a sort of a continuation of the marginalization of informal waste pickers and the lack of appreciation of the important role they play in the waste management infrastructure as a whole. And generally, this poses three challenges to the waste management infrastructure or law and policy of South Africa. And these have to do with effectiveness. It undermines effectiveness, it undermines efficiency, and it undermines the principle of equity. And overall, the increase in plastic waste has been a stressor to the goal of reduction, recycling, recovering, treatment, and disposal. And it is now important for every actor in the plastic management infrastructure to rethink how they can enhance these measures in order to deal with the plastic pandemic. So at the moment, we have been able to identify some of some measures that can be taken to respond to this problem. Some of the measures can be taken immediately and others will need a long-term commitment. And one of the measures that needs long-term commitment is the move towards circular economy. One of the ways through which South Africa could move towards the circular economy in respect to management of plastic waste is by adopting the regulations on extended producer responsibility. The extended producer responsibility are really environmental policy that allows the imposition of responsibility on a producer of plastic to be extended from the entire life of a plastic commodity. At the moment, the Department of Environmental Affairs has gazetted the extended producer responsibility regulations, and it would be important to accelerate the adoption of these regulations. Then the second measure, which also requires long-term commitment to change the law and policy and the entire infrastructure, is to mainstream the role of informal waste pickers into the waste management infrastructure in order to harness the efficiency, effectiveness, and equitable benefits that they stand to offer. In terms of short-term solutions, one would be to ensure that those who are engaged, health workers and other people who are engaged in the health sector, are provided with proper PPE equipment in order to reduce the amount of plastics that are being used as a supplement for PPE materials. And the final one is to designate PPE and other plastic waste that is being produced in hospitals as a priority waste in order to protect human well-being and accelerate recycling, recovery, treatment, and disposal. And this is a power that has been given to the Department of the Environment, Forestry and Fisheries by Section 14 of the Waste Act. And the reason that this is important is because the plastic waste and PPE waste being produced is not like regular waste. It may be contaminated by the virus itself, and it may further endanger, if it is not treated carefully, it may further endanger the health and well-being of humans. So with those few remarks, I return the floor to the chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rosemary and Felix, for a very interesting presentation. I would have loved to hear a bit more about medical waste also from the point of view of South Africa. You've touched